We are in Pirkei Avot, second paragraph, Mishnah 5, and here's how it goes. So Hillel Omer, Al tifrosh min hatzibur, ve'al ta'amin ba'atzmecha ad yom motcha, ve'al tadin et chavecha ad shetagia limkomo, ve'al tomar davar she'י אפשר לשמוע שסופו להישמע, ve'al tomar לכשפנה אשנה שמה לא תיפנה. Right? Hillel said, do not separate yourself from the community. That's one. There are 5 things he says. So do not separate yourself from the community. Do not trust in yourself until the day of your death. Do not judge your fellow man until you have reached his place. Do not say something that cannot be understood, trusting that in the end it will be understood. And say not, when I shall have leisure I shall study. Perhaps you will not have leisure or availability. And just so we can go back, when it says do not say something that cannot be understood, trusting that in the end it will be understood, because that's there will obviously be different understandings of what that means. That's not the understanding we'll be going with. We'll look at the Maharal, but we'll get there when we get there. So first, it seems like there's a lot going on in this Mishnah. I mean, first, it's Hillel. Second, it's literally 5 different things that seem fairly unrelated. What's the deal? How do we link all these things? Do we link all these things? Is that even possible? Or is it just some like really good advice that Hillel is sharing and just figured if I'm already speaking, may as well have it all in one go. So look at the Maharal, who's going to tie it all together in an amazing way. But first, I just want to kind of introduce with the Yein Levanon. He says something really interesting on so it was a really beautiful insight he had. He says like this: this mashal that Chazal decided to use in this Mishnah, as in don't judge a person until you get to his place, is very specific. Now, what does that mean? He says you can't understand something until you see it up close. Now that sounds obvious, but he says no. But think of the way we see things in terms of actually perceive, as in the sense of sight. Right? That is actually a good mashal to the way we can judge someone or how we should not be judging someone. That is to say, when you see something from far away, you think you're sure of what something is. The closer you get, the more clarity you have, and then once you're finally standing face to face, you have perhaps perfect clarity, maybe not clarity, but certainly visibility. So how does a person go about that? Or even, let's just say, when a person is examining a beautiful scenery, right? You're climbing up a mountain, and your friend is just like 10 steps ahead, and he's like, wow, wait till you see what I'm seeing. And you're like, come on, how big? I can just looking to the left, and I can see the mountains too. And he's like, no, it's different here. And then lo and behold, you walk 10 steps, you're literally right where he's standing, and you see the view, and you're like blown away. Or in investigations by police officers, or with regards to artwork, or with regards to anything, you could just imagine that when the investigators, they get real up close, and a person who's, again, just a few steps away, the investigator might be like, no, you have to come right here and see it, and you'll see it from a different perspective. And so it says the Yein Levanon, that's the same thing here. An intellectual seeing, intellectual understanding, right? The sechel is similar in that way to the chush ha're'iyah, right? To the sense of seeing. You can only see something from someone's perspective once you're actually literally standing in his place where you see it. Otherwise, you can't see it from his perspective, and you just don't get it. You're not understanding what it is he's seeing. And so he says that's why you can't judge someone. You can't get it until you're literally standing in his place where he is, with that perfect visibility of what he is seeing from his perspective. That, I think, should go a long way in terms of helping us understand why we should not judge people so quickly. So that's one. But he also gives a different parish, and I thought this was also a very powerful idea. He says, you can't just judge someone until because he says mekomo can also mean a person's spiritual standing. That is to say, this could potentially go either way, right? I don't think Yein Levanon says in a kind of a lesser view. He says more, if a person is holding in a certain place, and you might think that the guy's being a little too picky. The guy says, oh, I'm so disappointed in myself. I did X. I shouldn't have done X. You're like, why are you being so exacting with yourself? Calm down, relax. You know what I mean? Like, no one's perfect. Just take it easy. And it's just you can't get it because you're not standing where he's standing. You don't. If a person, for example, only eats chal v'Yisrael or only drinks chal v'Yisrael, and one time he slipped or whatever, he had cinnamon toast crunch, whatever, right? It's like OUD or whatever it is. It's not chal v'Yisrael. And like, okay, look, I mean, like, it's kosher, dude. It's got an OU. What's the big deal? But to him, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. This is something he's taken upon himself. You don't know how long he's been doing it, the things that he sacrificed for, and how much it means to him. And so, I mean, that's perhaps like a bit of a kind of a silly example, but you can see how it's hard to understand where a person stands spiritually if you're not holding there, because to you, you just think he's being a little too exacting, and you think he should relax. But to him, it's a big deal. But similarly, and this is also important, often people will look at criminals and be like, let's say someone who's a mugger, right? He mugs people, he goes around robbing people, and he mugs someone. And normally, when he meets someone, I had a friend who was mugged, and he said that the guy literally came up to him, slapped him straight across the face. And my friend was so shocked. When the guy said, "Give me your wallet or your money or whatever," my friend just handed it over because it was just shocking. Like, he'd never dealt with that, so just forked it over. The guy's clearly capable of violence, and it did not hesitate to do so. Fine. So let's just imagine the same guy. His next victim, he doesn't slap him across the face. He just puts on an aggressive posture. He says, "Give me your money." Okay, so he gets the money and he moves along. You might say, "Oh, this low life, oh, he's terrible." And look, we're certainly not endorsing that. But if this person struggled with that desire to want to use physical violence to get that wallet, to get that money, to get the cash, and he didn't use the violence, he wanted to and he didn't, that's a moral decision. You can't just look and just completely invalidate everything that he did just because he's on a lower spiritual level than you. You just see from his perspective, what was that like? You wouldn't go mugging, but maybe you'd be a little dishonest with your tax returns or the way you bill, if you're on a time clock, like a lawyer or an accountant or anybody else, right, who has to keep their time and bill it. Okay, so too, like, I would never throw a brick through a wall. I wouldn't go mugging people. Okay, but you'd steal in other ways, right? You're not so exacting, and so the idea is, don't judge a person on their free will decisions until you're standing in his place and you understand that how difficult those free will decisions are, because all free will decisions are difficult decisions. Fine. Moving on to the Maharal, and he says something astounding. We may not be able to get through all of it, but hopefully we'll hit the main highlights. She says, "Al tifrosh min hatzibur." What is this? How does this connect to the rest of the Mishnah? And how do all these other ideas connect to this? Like, what is this doing here? Why didn't Hillel just say all this in the first parak? She's like this. Al tifrosh min hatzibur picks up from what we just saw before in terms of the importance of the tzibur. Why is the tzibur so important? Because it's the public. It's the klal, right? The klal is eternal. Effectively, it contains everything. And by way of analogy, we may have spoken about this before, but I heard this from Rav Bernstein in the name of Rav Schwab. Rav Schwab talked about how do we relate to, like, our place as Jews and the Jewish people. And so he says, let's bring it down biologically. There's a human body. The human body, the cells keep replacing themselves, right? You always have new cells constantly. So I just looked it up. Apparently, every 7 to 10 years, head to toe, a person's cells are completely different than what they were before. So you can say either a 2015 or a 2012, all of your cells are completely 100% different than what they were in 2015 or 2012. Completely. There isn't a single cell that you had back then that you have now, which is the same person. I mean, like, it's not like you have different memories. It's not like you have total memory loss, hopefully, or like hopefully not. So what does that mean? You're completely different. On a cellular level, you're completely different. But on a klal level, on an entity level, in terms of your self, the same person, right? I mean, you changed, you've learned more, your midot have evolved, but the idea is you're still the same person. You can't, like, not a complete. I mean, like, you're not literally a totally different entity just because on a cellular level you're different. That's not the way that works. So that's kind of like the klal. There's the prati, right, the individual, against the klal. The klal is eternal. The prati constantly changes, and that's where the Maharal brings the rest of his parush in. How does this go? Because it's the klal. It's eternal. It's all powerful, or it's very powerful. He says, that's his language. As opposed to Ha'adam HaPrati, Baal Shinoi, is constantly changing. V'nofel tachat hashinoi, and he's constantly under, like, that, just under the changing mode. ואפשר לו להשתנות כל שעה, he can change every moment, וכל רגע, כאשר הוא נופל תחת הזמן אשר הוא משתנה. And that's why the next statement the Mishnah says is, ואל תאמין בעצמך עד יום מותך. Don't trust yourself until the day you die. Because you, as an entity, can constantly change. You are constantly capable of changing. Don't think, I'm a tzaddik, I've learned all of Shas, I've been doing this for years, I would never miss a day of tefillin, I've been putting it on for 60 years straight. You could change. There's actually an example in the Gemara where Rabbi Yochanan, Kohen Gadol, changed, I think became I don't remember if it was a tzeduki, but effectively veered out of the path of Torah at the age of 80. Unbelievable. 80 years old. And he changed. And moreover, then it goes on. Why can't you judge your friend until you get to his place? Because it is, if you look at yourself, think of the things that you would have done maybe 10, 20 years ago and where you are now, and you'd be completely puzzled by that. I could speak for myself. Any Baal Tshuva, I think, could say that. If you told me at the age of 22, Ufir, you're going to be a lawyer and you're going to be a black hat wearing Jew, I'd be like, you are crazy, never going to happen, never. The first time a rabbi told me that, suggested I should go, this is once I was actually interested in Torah, mentioned that I should go to yeshiva, I laughed in his face because I could never have imagined going to yeshiva, going to law school. That was just so outside of my frame of reference. It was just never going to happen. But the idea is, people get different reasons. People start understanding start understanding things differently, and through those different thought processes that they have, they make different decisions. And so it is, you don't know where he's standing. You don't know what his thoughts are, what his thought processes are. And that is the idea of being a Baal Shino. A person changes. You can't understand how he thinks until you actually get to understand why he thinks the way he does, and that could take a long time. And don't say something that this is how the Maharal understands it, that such a thing would never happen, because it will eventually happen. I mean, we're living during COVID-19. If you told someone 3 years ago, perhaps even 2 years ago, that there would be a global pandemic in which the whole world would shut down and the entire global economy would change, and the guy would think you're a total lunatic. You're nuts. That's never going to happen. Lawyers certainly didn't expect it. I don't know how many contracts even had that COVID language in it beforehand. It was a whole mess. Or even going back to 2001 with 9/11, lo aleinu, but what if someone's like, yeah, there's going to be a huge terrorist attack against the United States? That's never going to happen. Never going to happen. They're going to bring down the Twin Towers. Not buying it. Happened. It's never going to happen. It will happen. And it has happened. Because it's about, even these huge momentous events, they happen. Right? And don't say, look, I'll learn when I have time, right? Because maybe you'll never have time. And that's pretty obvious in terms of things constantly change, even on a daily basis, on an hourly basis. You're like, look, 6 p.m., let me just have dinner, I'll learn at 8. And then something will come up and it becomes impossible. And there's a final wraparound with the Maharal, and this is just, it was the nail that sealed it all together. I'll read you what he says. You have to understand that he's talking about all types of changes. All types of changes. What does he mean? Right? Anything that's physical changes on its own. That's why when the Mishnah says, a person as an individual is literally part and parcel of change. Such a person changes. That's his nature. That's the way things work. And then the next thing, what's the different type of changing? And even his thought processes, his reasonings, the way he thinks, that changes. And that's reflected in Valtadin. Come on, you don't understand how he thinks, and the way he thinks could change. And moreover, and moreover, even time-related things, these huge momentous occasions, and you say it's never going to happen, it could happen. Things change, right? The world is a different world after 9/11. The world is a different world since COVID-19 has struck, right? And that's what it means was. And then finally, more than anything else, And moreover, a person himself will constantly change. His schedule changes on a daily basis, potentially even an hourly basis. Your schedule will constantly change. It's never set and rigid, right? Don't say, I'll learn when I have time, because maybe you'll never have time. Things will constantly come up. They'll always be hammered in. And we'll end it there. Amazing. Should change your vision of this Mishnah forever. Certainly did for me. And we'll see you next time.